I'll never call off. Fourth quarter pressure. Back of the jersey. Double sevens. No matter how many times, I'll never get tired of that reference. Hall of Fame for dirt. We love you with a deep reverence.
Hi, this is Luka Doncic.
Hi, I'm Kyrie Irving.
And you're listening to the Mavs Step Back Podcast.
They waiting on my fall off. I'll never call off. Fourth quarter pressure. Back of the jersey. Double sevens. No matter how many times, I'll never get tired of that reference. Hall of Fame for dirt. We love you with a deep reverence. Backcourt nasty. I wonder who gon' check him. Cuban did his thing when he went and got number 11. I still got his picture on my wall at 707. Feels synonymous with Kyrie, how we both train with aggression. Competition obsolete. Trying to breathe life into my dreams. I'm so tired of sleep. Still got some work from last season that was incomplete. So hungry for redemption. Thank my boys, just might overeat. Like Luka with his 3 of them hit, my mic is prone to overheat. I pride myself the most. I'm 22 and my folks proud of me. I took the harder way since I was 10. Was no surprise to me. A step back, Mavs blowing up was no surprise to me. And I'm speaking honestly. 7.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Trigg. I'm joined today by Tayler Peterson. He is a co-host of the Uncontested, which is an Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. He is also, they're also part of the Blue Wire Network, as we are. Tayler, how's it going, man? How are you enjoying this Mavs Thunder second round series so far?
I'm doing great. Dalton, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a long time in the making. We've been talking all season about trying to get each other on the podcast. But man, what a fun series we get to break down. It's a battle, just like we talked about before we started recording. We knew it was going to be a grind of a series, and here we are, 1-1 heading back to Dallas.
I wish we could do this more often. It's so hard to, fit each other into each other's schedules, because I think what a lot of people don't realize that tune in and listen to Mavs Step Back or the Uncontested and all, I don't think people realize, like, we have day jobs too. Like, this isn't, we're not full-time media. We do this as a side gig and have other jobs, and, we have to fit it in where we can. So I do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time for us, and I'm glad we're able to do it today. But yeah, man, look, we spoke about this before the series started, and your words to me were, you were nervous a little bit, but you were cautiously optimistic. And I felt the same way. And my biggest concern from the Mavs side of things was, how is Luka Donic going to look? Because, I think it was game 3 of that Clippers series in the first round. He sprained his knee. His 3-point shot hasn't been right since then. It wasn't in game 1. He shot 1 of 8. And then in our game 1 recap pod, I was like, okay, well, Luka threes are basically a turnover at this point. Maybe he needs to just focus on getting on the block, posting up, getting to the rim, because he was shooting 80% at the rim for the playoffs going into last night's game 2. He just only gotten there like 20 times so far through 7 games. So, but then Luka did this thing where he it looks like he's never going to hit a 3 again, but then he came out in game 2 and went 5 of 8.
And just some insane. I mean, it looked much more like healthy, normal Luka there, especially in the first half, because he had some of those step back threes that were just, there's nothing you can do. My other co-host, one of our other co-hosts, Jacob, him and I were there at the game. And I think of one specifically, I think it was in the second quarter, where our rookie, Cason Wallace, is there guarding Luka. Did an incredible job on him one-on-one. And then all of a sudden, Luka gets that step back off. Cason tries to contest it, but Luka just drains it. Money. And there's only so much you can do there. That's the Luka that you guys know and love for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it looked much more like that Luka. I will say it seemed like he cooled off in the second half, and it was more noticeable that he had that limp back. So I found that interesting. Maybe it was like adrenaline or something that kind of carried him through that first half. But regardless, he impacted the game at such a high level. And one thing that you mentioned specifically about Luka, game 1 versus game 2, what was noticeable to me is he was able to get to his spots again, especially down low, into the paint, into the mid-range. Didn't matter if Lou Dort was on him or who it was, he was able to get back to those spots. That's a pretty big contrast to game 1, where I don't think he was quite able to do that, and the Thunder were able to do a better job on him defensively.
Well, and one thing on the threes that I noticed last night, and it was, like you said, he cooled off a little bit in the second half, but in the first half specifically, when he was coming off the screens, he had a quick trigger on the three. He wasn't waiting to get more, to take another step or two and then shoot. It was basically a catch and shoot three off of the screen, which I think, helped him out a lot, because it didn't. Lou Dort is one of the best in the league in fighting over screens. And, you gotta shoot while you can, because he's going to be there, soon afterwards. So that was one big thing I saw different in how he approached shooting his threes in last night's game. But I mean, overall, like I said, this series has kind of gone the way we both thought. Jason Kidd has never won a game 1 while being the head coach of the Mavs. He's 0-5 now.
Crazy.
But he's won 3 of the 4 series that he's had his team in. So this is kind of on par for what we're, expecting from the Mavs. They come out in game 1. It's kind of a feel out game. They're really not all together. And then they come back in game 2, and it's like, okay, well, here's the team we saw for the whole second half of the season. So now we have a tied series. It's 1-1. We're going to Dallas for games 3 and 4. Actually giving out a couple of tickets to a lucky winner today. That we did a thing. If people left us an Apple Podcast review, we're doing a random drawing today. Somebody's getting 2 tickets.
Very fun.
So
awesome.
That'll be fun. But yeah, man, look, this has been exciting. We both thought this was going to be entertaining and a long, hard-fought series. And I think, look, I wouldn't be shocked at all if this thing goes 7. That's kind of what I'm expecting at this point, honestly. And, the MVP stuff I wanted to talk to you about too, because there's so much debate that went on, not just now that the results are final, but throughout the entire season. It was Luka versus Shea, and then Jokic thrown in there, and then everybody, it was a big hoopla. And now the results are in. Jokic wins his 3rd MVP. Shea comes in 2nd. Luka comes in 3rd. All 3 guys had excellent cases, to win MVP, but the people went with Jokic. It was by a wide margin that they went with Jokic. And then, I think Luka only got 4 first place votes, which, like I said, I didn't expect him to win MVP after the straw polls got thrown out there by ESPN. But, I thought he would have gotten a little bit more than 4 first place votes. And I think Shea got 15. And I'm sure you probably thought he should have gotten a little bit more than that. So, what are your thoughts on the MVP stuff? Because I feel like we probably have the same feelings that, even if our guy didn't win the MVP, this should have been a closer race, a closer 3-man race than what it ended up being.
I agree completely. Honestly, I specifically, like you said, I think just heading into it, we probably had a pretty good idea that Jokic was going to win it. I was thinking 2nd and 3rd place was going to be much closer between Luka and Shea. I found that very interesting. Obviously, Shea's case is his advanced stats, pretty incredible, leading the team, the number 1 team in the West, one of the youngest teams in the league. The most 30-plus point games since like Michael Jordan or something crazy. Like,
Yeah.
These are all just stats off the top of my head. And then you have Luka, who's just a triple-double machine, putting up incredible stats on very efficient, being very efficient in doing so, all while carrying his team, who had a lot of injuries, had a big shakeup at the trade deadline. He was able to overcome all of that, keep the Mavs afloat, middle of the conference in a very competitive Western Conference. And then Jokic, right? Obviously, Jokic is probably the best player in the league. But, yeah, I thought it'd be a little closer, especially with the Nuggets struggling like they did down the stretch.
Well, and also, and I don't think this should have been a knock on Shea's MVP case, but I think it should have been something that enhanced Luka's case, and that was overall team health. You can't knock Shea for saying the Thunder have had pretty great health throughout this season. They just
right.
they haven't had to deal with that a lot. You know, their starting lineup, I think, was right there with Denver for having the most minutes played together this season. So, I mean, you can't knock Shea for that. I mean, that's, you know, you got to play the cards you're dealt. But I do think Luka should have, you know, had a little bit of that enhance his case because, you know, the Mavs injury luck was crappy, especially in the first half of the season. And, you know, if it wasn't for him averaging a near 30-plus point triple-double, I don't know where the Mavs would have been by
Right. Yeah, you're
by
fighting
early
the play-in.
February.
Exactly.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would have been rough. So, you know, yeah, I mean, look, I don't take the MVP stuff as seriously as, you know, Mavs Twitter. Or I don't know how Thunder Twitter is with all this, but, you know,
All the same.
it's all the same. It's just different teams. I don't think Luka and Shea and Jokic, I don't think they care as much about it as the fan bases do. And I feel like, you know, the ultimate goal is what everybody is thinking about, and that's that, you know, shiny golden trophy at the end of the year. And then maybe you get finals MVP, and then that's the real MVP that you really want. But
Right.
you know, I do think these high level athletes, especially ones with killer instincts like this, I feel like you look for any kind of edge you can for extra motivation, like Michael Jordan did. You know, just kind of making stuff up in his head to get him going. And I feel like coming short of winning MVP could, you know, add a little extra motivation for both Luka and Shea going into the rest of this series, and especially Luka because he finished third out of the
right. And we saw it last night. We saw it last night in game 2.
So just from your perspective, I mean, what would you like to see different from the Thunder? I mean, what, in your opinion, what went wrong for them against the Mavs in game 2?
Well, the low-hanging fruit is obviously the 3-point discrepancy. The Mavs came out red hot, and I'm sitting there with Jacob, and he's like, this isn't sustainable. You just got right out the storm, and it'll even back out, and we're going to have a close game at the end. Well, it was sustainable, and they were able to withstand that the entirety of the game. Let's see, 48% from 3, 18 of 37 to the Thunder's 33%. Not only that, they got up 7 more 3-point attempts than the Thunder were able to get up. And that's huge. When the Thunder aren't making those shots, we see them really struggle because it packs the paint, clogs the paint for players like Shea and Dub that love to get to the rim. And we really saw them get frustrated there, especially towards the second half. I found it interesting. It was kind of an inverse in a way of game 1, where the Thunder came back in game 3. They actually, I think they got a 1-point lead. Where in game 1, the Mavs, I think, were down by 1, but then the Thunder go on a run, are able to close it out. Basically, don't look back. Same exact thing happened in game 2 for the Mavericks. You guys had shooters that were knocking down shots. They go on a big run there, and the rest was essentially history. So the 3-point shooting is obviously one to monitor. I think another one from like a personnel standpoint is the Josh Giddey conundrum, right?
Yes.
We've been dealing with this all season. Josh is an incredible player, really started to get it going there towards the end of the season. And then in series 1 was really fantastic outside of the first game. So the optimist could say, yeah, he's had a couple bad games, but look what he did in game 4 against the Pelicans. He won us that game, essentially, especially in the fourth quarter. You just got to ride it out. Unfortunately, though, when you're not a Shea, a Luka, a Kyrie, or a J-Dub, there's certain series that just aren't your series. And I think that might be the case with Josh Giddey. And so Jason Kidd made a great adjustment game 1. A little surprised we didn't see it earlier, but he started Luka on Josh Giddey. And I thought Josh did a pretty good job and was pretty effective when Luka was guarding him because he was able to attack space, create for teammates. But then in the second half, Jason Kidd has Gafford or any of the centers that are currently playing guarding Josh. And that's what he started with in game 2. And it was awful. I think Josh was, let me pull it up really quick. Again, plus minus is always a little bit of a noisy stat, but I think this really does tell the story of last night's game.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. We mentioned this on our post-game pod last night.
yeah. Minus 20 for Josh Giddey.
In 11 minutes.
And only 11 minutes, which I believe is I think I saw it's a career low for him, which makes sense because he played so much his rookie year. But it was pulled to start the second half in place of Aaron Wiggins, who's been playing phenomenal for us. So obviously that's a big one, something to monitor. Does Josh start game 3? I think he probably does. But he's going to have a pretty quick leash. And so who comes in for Josh? How can they counteract that? One thing we saw during the season when they were letting Josh play through this is getting him in off-ball movements and some off-ball screens and cuts and things of that nature. Haven't seen a lot of that yet. So maybe that's an adjustment they can make. But I think more than likely it's just going to be substituting in like an Isaiah Joe or Aaron Wiggins instead.
I agree 100%. And look, the Josh Giddey conundrum for OKC has been very similar to the Tim Hardaway Jr. one for Dallas. He started out the season great. The first half of the season, he was arguably a 6th man of the year candidate. Despite his struggles in the second half of this season, he still ended up being the Mavs' 3rd leading scorer. And shooting pretty good, 36, 37% from 3, I believe. So, we've all just been kind of sitting around here. And I remember, talking with some guys yesterday before the game, and I was like, we're due for a good Tim Hardaway Jr. game. It's been a while since we've seen him, actually make some shots. And lo and behold, he had a decent game in game 2. He had
huge game.
Huge game for Tim Hardaway Jr. 17 points in 19 minutes, was a plus 15 off the bench. I mean, he had
only 2 of 4 from 3, which surprises me. As effective as he was, you would think that the majority of that production would come from the 3-point line. He was 6 of 10 from the floor overall. He was doing just a little bit of all of it. I also thought he played really well defensively as well.
Yeah, and I think that was probably something that was communicated to Tim Hardaway. It's like, okay, if we're going to continue to play you in this series, it can't just be chucking threes like it was in game 1. You got to get moving off the ball. If it's a mid-range shot, if it's, a cut to the basket for a layup, getting fast. He got a huge offensive rebound in that 4th quarter, and then just kind of stepped behind the corner 3-point line and nailed a huge corner 3. That was one of the bigger plays of the game, in my opinion. Stuff like that. If this is the Tim Hardaway Jr. the Mavs are going to get for the rest of the series, then things are going to get pretty interesting. But on a night where Kyrie Irving just didn't have it offensively, the Mavs really had the slack picked up by not just Hardaway, but also PJ Washington, who's just been fantastic since coming over from Charlotte. PJ Washington is in heaven right now, basketball heaven, coming from the Charlotte Hornets and playing in the 2nd round of the Western Conference playoffs.
And he's fired up about it. Absolutely. Playing for something that absolutely has a purpose. But man, PJ was fantastic. 11 of 18 from the floor last night. 7 of 11 from 3 is the big thing there. 11 rebounds to go alongside that. Just absolutely torched the Thunder. And so that's one other adjustment maybe to keep an eye on for the Thunder. Their big thing has been let these other guys beat you. They are focusing on Kyrie and Luka, obviously. But one thing that kind of surprised me, especially a little more in game 1, is we saw the Thunder throwing some double teams at Luka. We don't see that often with the Thunder. Usually they guard their defenders straight up because they're a great defensive team with great point of attack defenders, perimeter defenders. So I found that interesting in game 1. That led to some open corner 3s. And in game 1, the Mavs weren't able to hit those. But the thing I found interesting is last night they didn't hit him either. I think this stat shows 4-13 from one corner, 2-6 from the other corner. It was the wings. It was each elbow that they were really hitting those shots. And a large majority of that came from the 2 players you talked about, which is why I want to bring it up. And PJ and like I said, Tim Hardaway Jr. was only had 2 3-point 3-point shots. But Luka, it's the other one there as well. He was just draining shots from the wings.
Yeah, and another big thing, we talked about the 3-point shoot. It really was night and day difference. Like the script was completely flipped from game 1 to game 2, because in game 1, the Mavs, they were just 12 of 35 from 3, so 34%. Thunder 16 of 35, almost 46%. And then in game 2, the Mavs are 48.6% from 3, and Thunder are 33 points. So there's all these different things we can look at and dissect, and certain players contributing here and there and all this other stuff. But sometimes you can just look at one category and say, hey, that's the difference.
That's the
between
game. Yep.
These two games, and that was the biggest difference is the 3-point shooting. But another thing that I found interesting is, one of the big talking points, at least from the Mavs side of things, heading into this series was how their size was going to be a factor against this Thunder team. That, I mean, look, Chet is amazing. He has a bright future. When as soon as he adds some more weight, like, I don't know what you're going to be able to do with him, but going into this series, one of the talking points was like, okay, well, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively, they're bigger in a sense, physically. And that was going to be a big part in the Mavs controlling the boards. Well, in game one, the Thunder obliterated the Mavs on the boards, like 52-39, I believe. And then the Mavs, they didn't win by a big margin in game two, but they did win the rebounding battle, 44-41. So I think a lot of what rebounding is a total team effort, no matter, whether you have the bigger front court or not. Guys, your guards and your forwards, they have to have a collective effort, and you can't just assume that somebody's boxed out. You got to find your man. You got to have him boxed out. You can't allow, second chance opportunities. And I thought overall the Mavs did a better job in game two, finding their guys to box out and not allowing as many second chance points. And I think that played, not as big of a factor as the 3-point shooting did, but it was certainly right up there. I think that's probably the second biggest difference from the first game to the second game. And with that being said, I mean, do you think that's something, as far as rebounding goes and the Mavs having the size that they do you think that's something that can be adjusted to from OKC's side going forward?
Think you absolutely nailed it. I went ahead and pulled up the game one stats just to quickly look and go through it. I love what you said. It's more of a team effort than one individual big man down low, like Jonas Valanciunas, who the Thunder faced in the first round. We let him go to work down low. He got a bunch of rebounds, and it didn't matter, because if that's how you're going to play, if you're just going to dump the ball to a big man all game, we'll take that. But looking at game one, Lou Dort had 4 rebounds. J-Dub had 5. Chet had 7. SGA had 9. Giddey and Aaron Wiggins had 5 apiece. But last night, if I can get it, here we go. Only 1 for Dort, 5 for Dub. 5 for Dub, 4 for Dort. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I pulled a stupid app.
Yeah, Jaylen Williams only had 4. That was kind of surprising.
Yeah, very. Okay, sorry. But what I'm trying to say is I think the Mavs did a very good job at finding bodies and not letting the Thunder players get into the paint and get some of those rebounds, especially when they're missing shots like that. That is key. And so that's certainly something to keep in mind. I think it's more of an effort thing more than like a big adjustment, but I would expect to see the Thunder be more aggressive and attack the boards in game 3. That's something that some of the players mentioned post-game. Just the overall effort, both on defense, the defensive effort, as well as crashing those boards, just wasn't quite the same as game 1. But from an adjustment standpoint, one thing we can keep an ay on, and it's kind of funny to call this the double big lineup for OKC, because neither of these guys are kind of true bigs, but we call it the double big lineup because it's Jaylen Williams from Arkansas, and Chet. And it's a very effective lineup that we've seen do well throughout the season, but Mark didn't use it a lot, which kind of made you scratch your head and wonder, like, is this an adjustment he's going to save, or a wrinkle he's going to save for the playoffs? And we saw a little bit of it in each of these games, not a lot. And we saw it pretty early in game 1, in game 2. I found that interesting. I think actually Josh Giddey was who was pulled off and J-Will came in. J-Will's been a huge swing factor for the Thunder this playoffs. This series, I kind of thought they wouldn't go to J-Will quite as much because he's not the best lateral defender. He's not super quick, plays in drop coverage. He can't really switch on screens. And when you're playing against a Luka and Kyrie, that's killer. But he's done a fantastic job and has been hitting his shots, like I mentioned, which has been huge. So if you're trying to shore up the rebound discrepancy, playing that double big lineup is something to keep an eye on. I wonder if Mark goes to it a little more, especially if Giddey continues to struggle.
Well, with the way Jaylen Williams from Arkansas, we do have to – I don't know how y'all – go about talking about
J-Will and J-Dub. But I know the Mavs fans won't know the difference between that. And so that's why I threw out. Yeah. So Jaylen Williams from Arkansas goes by J-Will. Jaylen Williams from Santa Clara goes by J-Dub.
Okay, for Mavs fans listening to this who don't know the difference between the two, Jaylen Williams off the bench for the Thunder looks like
There you
he
go.
could be related to Jalen Brunson. He looks like a bigger version of Jalen Brunson, in my opinion.
That's weird. He does. I haven't put that together until just now, and like my mind's kind of blown. Weird.
Yeah, so if you see the big forward that looks like Jalen Brunson, that's the one that comes off the bench. And look, the Thunder would be, that would be a good adjustment to keep going with him because he's shooting 50%, not just from the field, but from three so far. I mean, obviously it hasn't been too many attempts, but I mean, he's shooting the ball really well. And, I think like these first two games, 3-point shooting is going to, play a huge factor for the rest of this series. But, if the rebounding stays even, like what we saw in game 2, it was 44-41 in the Mavs' favor. So, I mean, if it stays even like that and these shooting numbers, kind of even out, because obviously neither team is going to shoot near 50% from three every single game. It's going to level out. Then what we're going to end up having here are some classic games, in my opinion, some clutch games, that come down to the wire. And then, it'll come down to who can execute the best in the clutch. So I am super excited to see where this series goes from here. I know you are too. This has been exactly what we expected so far. Meanwhile, in the other side of the bracket, we're both kind of hoping the Nuggets do something to put up a fight against the Timberwolves, and then hopefully that series can go on a little bit longer.
Exactly. Last thing you want is a fully rested Timberwolves team with a week off. Like, man, it looked incredible.
Yeah, because whoever wins Mavs Thunder is going to be playing, either the Nuggets or the Wolves, and the way it's looking right now, it wouldn't shock me if the Wolves end up sweeping the Nuggets. But I think the Nuggets, coming off a championship and having a couple days rest, I think they'll show a little bit more pride.
Yep, absolutely. I agree. But you're right. I mean, especially if this game goes the distance like we both expect, 6 or 7 games, likely 7. And then the Wolves maybe have like a week or anywhere from like 5 days rest and have to go immediately from this battle of a series, the winner of this series, and then immediately jump in to play the Wolves or playing like the best team in the league. That's going to be tough.
Well, look, one more thing I want to talk to you about, and we'll head out here. But so obviously the Mavs and Thunder have been connected several times over the last 12 months. They made the draft night trade. The Mavs traded back. They were going to draft Derek Lively regardless, but they, traded back. You guys got Cason Wallace, who has been fantastic. I think he would have been fantastic in Dallas too, but, Lively was much more of a, immediate need. And I think he has some potential going forward too. And Cason Wallace probably would have been a little redundant with Josh Green and what he's doing in Dallas right now. So I think it worked out for both sides. Now, obviously the Gafford thing might be a little, I don't know how you feel about the Gafford stuff, but in my opinion, I kind of thought the Thunder could have used Gafford.
Yeah, that was somebody we had on like our, if you want to call it like a trade deadline wish list. Absolutely. And man, he's been fantastic. Him and PJ, both. We already talked about PJ, but just have been huge for the Mavericks post trade deadline. Gafford's played well this series. I'm not sure he's been quite as effective as I thought he was going to be. I think PJ's kind of taken on the role I thought Gafford might have against the Thunder. So that's something to monitor here as the Mavericks head back into Dallas. I think there's some big Gafford games left in the tank that we haven't seen yet. And by big, I mean, I just think he's going to be more effective crashing the boards and bullying the Thunder down low a little more. Yeah. Something I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I mean, he's a bull in a china shop, down low, especially, and I mean, I don't mean to, I'm not taking a dig at Chet when I say this, but I mean, Chet's just, the longer he stays in an NBA weight room, the better it will be over time. But right now, Gafford just, he's able to do what he wants to.
Right.
I mean, we saw that in the first round of the playoffs against Zubac of the Clippers. Zubac is a big dude. He is solid. He is strong. And Gafford, just pushed him off really easily and slammed one on him in game 6. So, I mean, Gafford is definitely capable of, having better efficiency than he has so far in these first two games, especially in game one. There were some bunnies that he missed that that didn't look like the gaffer that almost beat Wilt Chamberlain's record.
Right, for most consecutive shots. Yeah.
which ironically ended against the Thunder.
A lot of connections, like you were saying.
But yeah, look, this has been fantastic, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we check in with each other. The next time might be after it's 2-2 going back to OKC for a pivotal game 5. So we'll see how it goes. But look,
that's the hope. You got to get one in Dallas now.
I appreciate you joining me and taking some time out of your day to do this. And tell the people where they can find all of your content.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on. Like I said, Dalton, we've been talking about it off and on all season, and glad we got to make it happen. And like you mentioned, this definitely won't be the last time we're jumping on talking about this series, I'm sure. But you can find us on all social media platforms at _uncontested. Our biggest thing right now is really our YouTube channel. We've been putting a lot of work into that. You can find us going live on YouTube after especially in the playoffs, after every game. If you want a little bit of a Thunder perspective, yes, we're a little more biased probably if you're a Mavs fan listening, but we try and be pretty fair and break it down from both sides. So check out the YouTube, check us out on social media. Be sure to keep tuning in, supporting our guys over at the Mavs Step Back.
Definitely do so. Y'all do a great job covering the Thunder. And it's kind of, it's the same way over here too. We obviously, being fans of the team too, there's going to be a little bit of bias there, but I think we both do a pretty good job analyzing what's going on from game to game, and having that be the main focus more so than personal agendas, so to speak. So
right. Absolutely.
Well, Tayler, I appreciate it. And to all of you listening, we appreciate you as well. Be sure to go like, rate, and subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Like I mentioned earlier, we are giving away 2 tickets to Game 3 tomorrow, which will be announced early this afternoon. So, you'll have a little bit of time to do that. But even if you don't get in for this one, every time that you leave an Apple Podcast review, that enters you for a chance to win future giveaways too. So be sure to go do that. Guys, appreciate it. We will see you on the next one. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you Saturday night.